has been an awakening. Have you felt it?
Lately, there has been an awakening in the Dragon Ball community, and I'm very happy and very pleased that a lot of Dragon Ball fans are opening up to watching the series in its original form in Japanese. And it's no secret to a lot of Dragon Ball fans who have been around for a long time and the true hardcores that the old early 2000s Dragon Ball dubs had a lot of script changes. Some of them were minor, and some of them compromised the integrity of the story. So a number of fans, instead of watching the series in Japanese, went to Viz's English translation of the Dragon Ball manga, thinking that, well, it's the original manga. It can't be wrong. Can it? Well, I'd hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the Viz translation of the Dragon Ball manga is actually very far from perfect. And on this edition of Dragon Ball Lost in Translation, I will tell you all about what has been referred to in the community as Viz-isms, as well as give you numerous examples that I've discovered in my research, which may surprise you.
この番組はご覧のスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
That's right, the Viz translation of Dragon Ball is not perfect. The term Viz-isms has been around in the community for a number of years, and in my research I was unable to pinpoint the exact origin of the term, but it was definitely popularized by KANZENSHUU EX and KANZENSHUU, which eventually would merge and become KANZENSHUU a couple years ago. The term Viz-isms was used to describe very unusual and peculiar changes that Viz made when they translated Dragon Ball from the original volumes in Japan into English. It's kind of the literature version of a dub-ism or a dub change. Now, the unfortunate thing about this whole Viz-isms controversy, which I'm going to get into here shortly, is that unlike the anime, there is no Japanese version with subtitles, and there is no alternate translation for the Dragon Ball manga that's official. So the only way to read Dragon Ball in English is to read it through Viz Media. You can't just flick on a different language and, see another translation or whatever. This is very unfortunate, as it becomes harder and harder to really find out what's actually being said in the manga. Speaking of KANZENSHUU, at one point about 5 years ago, Herms actually attempted to discover every Viz-ism in the manga and create an archive of it, but was never able to finish the project because it was so overwhelming. When I was first doing my homework for this video, I was actually quite surprised as to how many translation changes there were in the Viz manga, to the point where it kind of bugged me, to be honest with you, because I had always thought the Viz manga was about 95% accurate, and in fact that number's a lot lower. But the problem is that we'll never really be able to tell exactly how inaccurate it is unless somebody actually goes page by page and translates everything their own way, which I don't think anybody's going to do anytime soon. Now, this video is purely meant to make you aware of some of these changes and that they exist, not to dissuade you from purchasing the manga, as I own the manga myself from Viz Media. And I do enjoy the Viz releases, but just understand that they are not 100% perfect, and I'm not even sure if they're even 80% perfect. And depending on the kind of fan that you are, will depend on how much you actually care about what I'm about to tell you. For some people, it doesn't really matter because they've seen the anime, they've read the manga, they pretty much know what's going on. And for others, it's going to bug them even more. Again, though, this video is just meant to educate and explain kind of some of the changes through examples. And before anybody asks why Viz made these changes, the answer is I have no idea. Some make sense, some really don't. Let's go back to chapter 1, very first chapter of Dragon Ball. After Bulma shoots Goku, in the original, Goku says, "I won't die from that." But in the Viz translation, he says it doesn't hurt him. I think there's a difference there. Not to mention that in the original manga, Goku says that his body is as, quote, hard as stainless steel. And that whole bubble was not even in the Viz. To me, Goku saying his body is as hard as steel is kind of an important detail. To others, maybe not so, but I think it would be a cool trivia question, right? Also, the character of Bulma was made a lot more vulgar and a lot more short-tempered in the Viz version than in the Japanese manga. Why? Again, who knows? In that very same chapter, Goku calls the 4-star Dragon Ball his memento or his keepsake from his grandfather. The word is katami, but Viz changes that to his grandfather's last possession, which is not the same thing. Sometimes Viz tended to over-exaggerate statements that were made in the original manga. Fast forward to chapter 52 of the manga. The announcer in the original Japanese describes Jackie's moon-destroying Kamehameha as a stupendous Kamehameha, but in the Viz version he calls it Jackie's greatest ever Kamehameha. Little bit of an over-exaggeration there. Then in chapter 53, the opening narration in the Japanese manga describes Goku and Jackie's match as very long. Meanwhile, the Viz changes it to the longest finals ever. No matter which way you slice it, this is incorrect and it's misinformation. Viz's, I guess you can call them upgrades or over-exaggerations of certain words, is only the tip of the iceberg. Obviously, with a manga series like Dragon Ball, which relies a lot on its sexual, crude humor, which works a lot easier for the Japanese culture than it does here, they had to omit a lot of the sexual jokes, which makes sense. And as the series progressed and we got to Dragon Ball Z, obviously there were a lot less sex jokes and therefore the translation by default was better. That is, until you get to the Buu Saga, where Viz pretty much takes a dump on the entire manga, and it becomes quite irritating. The problem with what happens in the Buu Saga involves the fact that Viz frequently and strangely changed the names of several characters to the point where a lot of the fan base actually believes that these are the accurate names and that Funimation got it wrong, when in fact in this case Funimation got it right and Viz made a pointless change. So it really shocked me when people were telling me that Vegito's real name is Vegerot based on the Viz manga. You put too much trust in Viz. No, actually Vegito's name is Vegito. Why did they choose to call it Vegirot? Well, because Vegeta and Kakarot in their minds equal Vegerot. However, if you look at the original Japanese name for Goku's real name, it is not Kakarot, it's Kakaroto. So it's Vegeta and Kakaroto, Vegito. Back in the 90s, when his name was translated as Kakarot, it stuck. Same thing with some other words. So that's why they chose Vegerot. But to me, it's still pretty stupid that even the Funimation dub said the correct name and they had to change it. Also, another one you hear a lot is that Pui Pui's real name is Pocus. Now, Pui Pui and Pocus are basically intertwining puns in between the languages, but if you're going to call Pui Pui Pocus, you might as well call Dabra Abracadabra, because that's the pun on that. It's kind of just a pointless change. But the one that infuriates me the most is the fact that they changed the name of Majin Buu to Jin Buu. A lot of people actually believe that Majin Buu is in fact a genie or a jinn. Now, a jinn, for those who don't know, is a creature or a being that comes from Arabic and Islamic theology. It's basically somewhat of a spiritual being, and I remember it being described as being scorching fire and smokeless. And they're basically creations from God that exist around us and among us. That's what's said in the Quran. Well, that's not what Majin Buu is. Look at the word Majin Buu. First of all, Ma means demon in Japanese, and Jin, like with Saiyajin or Namek Seijin, means people of. So if you literally translate Majin Buu's name, his name is actually demon person or demon man Buu. He's a demon, not a genie. He's not the Wishmaster, all right? I find it interesting, though, that when they translated the word Saiyan into Saiyan, they Americanized it or Westernized it by using the N, but with Majin, they kept the Jin. But then again, I guess that's fine because calling him, what would they call him, Man? That would be weird. Demon? I'm okay with them keeping it as Majin, but that's besides the point. The point is that for some reason, unexplained to me, Viz decided to change it to Jin Buu, and once again, Buu is a demon, not a genie. Putting together every single Viz-ism and mistranslation would be a massive undertaking and a huge project that would require somebody going through the manga with a fine-tooth comb and picking this out, which would take forever. And this video is, like I said, in no way meant to discourage you from reading the Viz manga, because one thing I have noticed is that very, very few changes actually impact the integrity of the story. Very, very few. So really the Viz manga is not a horrible way to read the series. Just when you read it, understand that it's not 100% perfect, that there are mistranslations, and that it is in no way a substitute for not understanding what's really going on. The problem is that Viz is the licensor for the manga, and there's no other translation officially out there for us to look at, so we're kind of stuck. Yes, the English-speaking world is kind of fucked when it comes to reading Dragon Ball 100% accurately in manga form, but just be aware of it when you read your manga. And really, if you're so inclined, I suppose you could watch Dragon Ball in Japanese and compare it to the manga to kind of see what happens. But of course, understand that the anime is also an adaptation, therefore it's not going to be perfect. Things will be different. Anyways, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for watching the video, and remember, enjoy Dragon Ball and don't shoot the messenger. I'll catch you down the road.